"Now, master," he continued, "you may do as you please about me. I've been a good servant to you, and I don't mean to say as you've been a bad master to me, but I do say that if you bear hardly on Master Ernest here, I have those in the village as'll hear on't and let me know, and if I do hear on't, I'll come back and break every bone in your skin, so there." John's breath came and went quickly, as though he would have been well enough pleased to begin the bone-breaking business at once. Theobald turned an ashen colour, not, as he explained afterwards, at the idle threats of a detected and angry ruffian, but at such atrocious insolence from one of his own servants. "I shall leave Master Ernest, John," he rejoined proudly, "to the reproaches of his own conscience." "Thank God and thank John," thought Ernest. "As for yourself, I admit that you have been an excellent servant until this unfortunate business came on, and I shall have much pleasure in giving you a character if you want one. Have you anything more to say?" "No more nor what I have said," said John sullenly, "but what I've said I means and I'll stick to, character or no character." "Oh, you need not be afraid about your character, John," said Theobald kindly, "and as it is getting late there can be no occasion for you to leave the house before tomorrow morning." To this there was no reply from John, who retired, packed up his things, and left the house at once. When Christina heard what had happened, she said she could condone all except that Theobald should have been subjected to such insolence from one of his own servants through the misconduct of his son. Theobald was the bravest man in the whole world, and could easily have collared the wretch and turned him out of the room, but how far more dignified, how far nobler had been his reply! How it would tell in a novel or upon the stage, for though the stage was as a whole immoral, yet there were doubtless some plays which were improving spectacles. She could fancy the whole house hushed with excitement at hearing John's menace, and hardly breathing by reason of their interest and expectation of the coming answer. Then the actor, probably the great and good Mr. Macready, would say, "I shall leave Master Ernest, John, to the reproaches of his own conscience." Oh, it was sublime! What a roar of applause must follow! Then she should enter herself, and fling her arms about her husband's neck, and call him her lion-hearted husband. When the curtain dropped, it would be buzzed about the house that the scene just witnessed had been drawn from real life, and had actually occurred in the household of the Reverend Theobald Pontifex, who had married a Miss Allaby, etc., etc. As regards Ernest, the suspicions which had already crossed her mind were deepened, but she thought it better to leave the matter where it was. At present she was in a very strong position. Ernest's official purity was firmly established, but at the same time he had shown himself so susceptible that she was able to fuse two contradictory impressions concerning him into a single idea, and consider him as a kind of Joseph and Don Juan in one. This was what she had wanted all along, but her vanity being gratified by the possession of such a son, there was an end to it. The son himself was not. No doubt if John had not interfered, Ernest would have had to expiate his offence with ache, penury, and imprisonment. As it was, the boy was to consider himself as undergoing these punishments, and as suffering pangs of unavailing remorse, inflicted on him by his conscience into the bargain. But beyond the fact that Theobald kept him more closely to his holiday task, and the continued coldness of his parents, no ostensible punishment was meted out against him. Ernest, however, tells me that he looks back upon this as the time when he began to know that he had a cordial and active dislike for both his parents, which I suppose means that he was now beginning to be aware that he was reaching man's estate. Chapter 42. About a week before he went back to school, his father again sent for him into the dining room, and told him that he should restore him his watch, but that he should deduct the sum he had paid for it, for he had thought it better to pay a few shillings rather than dispute the ownership of the watch, seeing that Ernest had undoubtedly given it to Ellen, from his pocket money in payments which should extend over 2 half-years. He would therefore have to go back to Roughborough this half-year with only 5 shillings in his pocket. If he wanted more, he must earn more merit money. Ernest was not so careful about money as a pattern boy should be. He did not say to himself, "Now I have got a sovereign, which must last me 15 weeks, therefore I may spend exactly 1 shilling and 4 pence in each week, and spend exactly 1 and 4 pence in each week accordingly." He ran through his money at about the same rate as other boys did, being pretty well cleaned out a few days after he had got back to school. When he had no more money, he got a little into debt, and when as far in debt as he could see his way to repaying, he went without luxuries. Immediately he got any money, he would pay his debts. If there was any over, he would spend it. If there was not, and there seldom was, he would begin to go on tick again. His finance was always based upon the supposition that he could go back to school with £1 in his pocket, of which he owed, say, a matter of 15 shillings. There would be 5 shillings for sundry school subscriptions, but when these were paid, the weekly allowance of 6 pence given to each boy in Hall, his merit money, which this half he was resolved should come to a good sum, and renewed credit would carry him through the half. The sudden failure of 15 shillings was disastrous to my hero's scheme of finance. His face betrayed his emotions so clearly that Theobald said he was determined to learn the truth at once, and this time without days and days of falsehood, before he reached it. The melancholy fact was not long in coming out, namely, that the wretched Ernest added debt to the vices of idleness, falsehood, and possibly, for it was not impossible, immorality. How had he come to get into debt? Did the other boys do so? Ernest reluctantly admitted that they did. With what shops did they get into debt? This was asking too much. Ernest said he didn't know. "Oh, Ernest, Ernest," exclaimed his mother, who was in the room, "do not so soon a second time presume upon the forbearance of the tenderest-hearted father in the world. Give time for one stab to heal before you wound him with another." This was all very fine, but what was Ernest to do? How could he get the school shopkeepers into trouble by owning that they let some of the boys go on tick with them? There was Mrs. Cross, a good old soul, who used to sell hot rolls and butter for breakfast, or eggs and toast, or it might be the quarter of a fowl with bread sauce and mashed potatoes, for which she would charge 6 penny. If she made a farthing out of the 6 pence, it was as much as she did. When the boys would come trooping into her shop after the hounds, how often had not Ernest heard her say to her servant girls, "Now then, you wanches, get some cheers." All the boys were fond of her, and was he, Ernest, to tell tales about her? It was horrible. "Now look here, Ernest," said his father with the blackest scowl. "I am going to put a stop to this nonsense once and for all. Either take me fully into your confidence as a son should take a father, and trust me to deal with this matter as a clergyman and a man of the world, or understand distinctly that I shall take the whole story to Dr. Skinner, who I imagine will take much sterner measures than I should." "Oh, Ernest, Ernest," sobbed Christina, "be wise in time, and trust those who have already shown you that they know but too well how to be forbearing." No genuine hero of romance should have hesitated for a moment. Nothing